And Susan is the opposite. She never wished to be famous. She wanted to be a singer, and she doesn't conform. She's just a normal person.
At 64, Susan Boyle steps onto a red carpet, and the world barely recognizes her. Not because she's changed who she is, but because she's changed the rules. October 2025, and suddenly, everyone is talking, snapping photos, wondering how the shy, small-town singer who stunned the world in 2009 ended up here. Her voice still carries, but it's what she's done between the notes, the choices, the quiet reinventions, the private battles that make this moment fascinating. Stick around, because we're peeling back the curtain on the surprises, the twists, and the unexpected chapters that have led to this dazzling, unmissable moment. The red carpet. Reveal. The buzz really started at the Pride of Britain Awards. Susan Boyle walked that carpet like she'd done it 100 times, but there was something different about her this time. She wore a simple black gown, sleek and elegant, with a new buttery blonde bob that made people double-take. No dramatic makeup, no exaggerated poses, yet you could feel the heads turning. Cameras clicked non-stop, and fans online were convinced their eyes were deceiving them. At 64, Susan looked not just transformed, but settled, like someone who had finally stopped trying to fit in and just decided to own her place in the world. What made it even better was that this wasn't some overly curated, airbrushed reveal. It was live, her, smiling easily, chatting with presenters about everyday heroes, and throwing in a lighthearted mention of her mum, who always believed in her. When someone asked about the hair, she laughed and said something about needing a change after too many gray Scottish days. The moment felt casual, but there was weight underneath it. You could tell she was in a different chapter, less about proving herself and more about just being. Later that evening, she posted a photo with a short caption, "Feeling good." Within hours, her comment section was full. Old fans, new admirers, all cheering her on. What makes this appearance feel so special is how far removed it is from the last few years. Susan had been out of the spotlight, taking a step back to focus on her health and her peace of mind. The last time people really saw her on stage, it was all grand, the kind of gigs where she'd share stages with legends, where the applause was deafening. What's more intriguing about Susan's appearance is how she hinted at exciting projects in a small interview clip that surfaced later. No details, just enough to stir curiosity. People started speculating. Was she working on new music? Maybe a tour? Or something even more personal, like finally telling her story in her own voice, beyond the headlines and documentaries that never quite captured her spirit. As the night came to a close, she quietly left the event. No big entourage, no performance, just a few graceful waves and smiles. But those few minutes on the carpet stayed in everyone's minds. It makes you wonder how she got here. How did that shy woman from a small Scottish town, who once stunned the world with a single audition, evolve into someone who can command a room with quiet confidence? That part of the story starts not with her childhood, we'll get there, but with the early 2010s, right after the glitter settled from Britain's Got Talent. The fame hangover. Susan Boyle didn't win first place, but at that point, it hardly mattered. Her audition had already become one of the most watched videos online, with over 100 million views spreading across the world in weeks. Soon after, she signed with Psycho and released her debut album, I Dreamed a Dream, which sold more than 5 million copies and became one of the fastest-selling debuts ever. She was performing for packed audiences, collecting Grammy nominations, and appearing on American talk shows. It was a whirlwind that seemed unstoppable, but then, somewhere around the year 2012, things began to shift. Away from the lights and the applause, Susan found herself sitting quietly in her house in Blackburn, staring at the walls, wondering what came next when the noise faded. It started subtly. The media began twisting everything about her. Her voice, her looks, her mannerisms. The same quirks that made her beloved in that first audition suddenly became punchlines. Headlines mocked her accent, her clothes, her background. She was no longer a singer in their eyes, but a tabloid character. It wore on her. Anxiety crept in, sleep became scarce, and the joy of performing started to feel more like a demand she couldn't keep up with. When she developed vocal nodes, those tiny injuries that can silence even the strongest voices, doctors told her to rest. But in a world that expected her to be available at every turn, real rest was something she didn't quite know how to give herself. Tours were postponed, phone calls unanswered, and the same dream that had once lifted her up started to weigh her down. One tour in America stands out around 2013. Susan was mid-performance when she sensed the crowd's energy fading. Phones were out, but not to record her voice, more to capture a spectacle. She finished the set, but behind the curtain, the exhaustion hit hard. Not long after, she received her Asperger's diagnosis. It didn't come as a shock exactly. She had always known she experienced the world differently. Still, putting a name to it made things clearer and heavier. Navigating fame suddenly made more sense, but that didn't make it easier. Reading rooms, handling interviews, smiling through noise, it all became a balancing act that left her drained. Her team rallied to support her with therapy and new vocal training, but Susan's instinct was to pull away. She bought a quiet house in the countryside, surrounded herself with calm, and spent her days in peace with her cat, Pebbles. But even in that quiet, she never disappeared completely. In 2014, she released Someone to Watch Over Me, and the response reminded people why she mattered in the first place. The voice, the heart, the honesty, still there, still unmistakable. The same people who had laughed at her years before now spoke with respect. Fans filled her shows again, and critics softened. It wasn't the fame-fueled explosion of her debut, but something steadier and more grounded. Then, a few years later, another challenge came. Around 2020, after a long stretch of touring, Susan suffered a minor stroke. It was a frightening moment that forced her to slow down once more. She recovered and returned to music the following year with her album Bridges. But by then, she knew fame could both give and take in equal measure. Through it all, what kept her steady was her connection to home, to the people and places that reminded her who she was before the fame. The memory of her mom, the woman who believed in her long before the world ever did, stayed close. And maybe that's why, even after everything, the pressure, the mockery, the health scares, she still found her way back. Because her story has never really been about one big break or one famous audition. It's always been a series of quiet recoveries, each one bringing her closer to herself. But before the headlines and the fame and the chaos of the spotlight, there was another Susan. The girl who grew up in a small Scottish town surrounded by coal fields and laughter. The one who sang at the kitchen table while her siblings teased her. The pre-fame grind. Back in the 1980s and 90s in Blackburn, West Lothian, life moved slowly among the brick houses hugging the old coal fields. Susan Boyle was just 9 when her dad, Patrick, a miner turned singer, filled their home with stories from the war and songs from the pubs, strumming his guitar by the fire while Susan perched on a stool, trying to copy every note. Her mum, Bridget, a shorthand typist with a quick laugh, would always insist Susan had something special. Being the ninth of 10 kids, Susan was doted on but also different. School was tough. Learning difficulties made reading and writing a slog. Words got jumbled, and attention wandered. Teachers called her slow, but at home, she was unstoppable, memorizing Shirley Bassey songs by ear. By her teenage years, the church choir became her escape and her stage. The local priest noticed this quiet girl with frizzy hair and glasses, belting out hymns like she was letting secrets out into the air. But outside the pews, it was rough. Classmates teased and shoved her through hallways, mocking her appearance. Susan toughened up, finding refuge in records by Elvis, Doris Day, and other singers who transported her somewhere else. Jobs came and went. A shorthand trainee like her mum, supermarket cashier, care worker for the elderly. She was 25 when she entered a local talent show called Midnight Star and sang I Don't Know How to Love Him, finishing second. It was only a spark, but a hint that the voice hadn't gone away. The 90s brought heavier responsibilities. Her mum's health faltered with cancer, then recovery, then more complications, and Susan quit odd jobs to care for her full-time. Days merged into nights of medication, meals and soft songs to soothe her mum. Bridget remained her anchor, constantly reminding her that her gift shouldn't fade. Susan recorded demos on a borrowed tape deck, sending them to record labels, but the rejections piled up. Some dismissed her for her looks, others for being too plain. One agent was blunt. Her voice was there, but she wasn't the next Madonna. Heart sinking, she paused her dreams, putting family first. In 2007, tragedy struck. Bridget passed at 47, leaving Susan, now 46, alone in the family flat. Depression settled in quietly. Bills stacked up, isolation pressed down. Benefits and volunteering at church filled the hours, but the spark dimmed. Friends encouraged auditions, but Susan hesitated. Who would want her now? Still, the voice persisted, simmering through karaoke nights where locals demanded encores. A demo tape floated to a producer, and politely, it was passed over. In her 40s, she wondered if her dream had faded for good. Yet even in the quietest months after her mum, Susan found a cassette of old recordings. Playing it reminded her of that pull she couldn't shake. 2 years later, a television show would flip everything, turning those small kitchen performances into a global sensation. And that audition? It wasn't just a performance. It was the crack in the door she would kick wide open. The story that followed would be far wilder than anyone could have guessed. The audition that broke the internet. April 2009, Glasgow's Clyde Auditorium. Susan Boyle, 47, shuffled on stage for Britain's Got Talent, every nerve in her body buzzing as she tried to steady herself. The judges, Simon Cowell with his usual smirk, Amanda Holden polite but measured, and Piers Morgan with eyebrows raised in skepticism, looked her over like she was just another auditioning hopeful. She wore a simple dress, her hair untamed, and spoke with a soft Scottish lilt, describing herself as a little nervous, which earned chuckles from the audience, especially when she admitted she had never been kissed. The teasing hit, light but sharp, and Cowell asked her age, prompting the answer, 47. The reaction? Eyebrows went up, murmurs ran through the room, and expectations for her were about as low as they could be. And then she sang. I dreamed a dream from Les Miserables, delivered without ornamentation, without vibrato tricks, just pure, honest voice carrying decades of waiting and longing. Cowell's smirk vanished. Holden's jaw dropped, and Morgan was on his feet, stunned. The audience erupted into a standing ovation before the last note faded, and backstage, producers scrambled to upload the clip online. By morning, YouTube had exploded with millions of views, and newspapers ran headlines like "Underdog Shocks Britain," capturing the public imagination overnight. The impact wasn't just the song itself, but the authenticity behind it. Susan wasn't a polished pop act. She wasn't performing a narrative of struggle crafted for sympathy. She was a woman who had spent decades living an ordinary life, who had waited tables and cared for family, channeling her experiences into pure emotion. Judges buzzed her through unanimously. In the semifinals, she performed "Memory from Cats," edging out a dance troupe, and in the finals, she sang "Wild Horses Against Diversity." The dancers took first place, but in the court of public opinion, Susan had already won. Suddenly, everything changed. Agents appeared seemingly out of nowhere, book deals arrived, and even invitations from royalty came. Her first album was recorded in a blur, topping charts in 20 countries, and arenas filled with fans eager to hear her live. Yet, the sudden fame brought a weight she hadn't anticipated. Paparazzi camped outside her door, interviews overwhelmed her, and her private life became scarce. She found solace in quieter moments, singing folk tunes at Scottish pubs, pints in hand, laughing with locals, reminding herself that her roots were still there. Even as months passed, the novelty of her rise faded and expectations mounted. Fans wanted her to remain the charming underdog, while she was quietly evolving, seeking normalcy amid the chaos. The rapid shift from nobody to global sensation was thrilling but fragile. She was figuring out herself while the world watched every step, and the pressures, public, personal, emotional, were quietly stacking up, shaping the Susan Boyle who would emerge stronger, grounded, and unmistakably herself in the years to come. And just when the spotlight seemed brightest, new challenges would arrive, not on stage, but in life and love, asking questions Susan hadn't yet prepared to answer. Susan Boyle's journey in finding love. Love has always been a tricky landscape for Susan Boyle. Even as her career soared and her voice reached millions. Back when she was 25, she had her first serious relationship. But it didn't last long, partly because her father wasn't supportive. That early experience, like many of her personal moments, unfolded quietly away from the public eye, and it shaped the cautious way she approached dating in later years. Fast forward to her post-Britain's Got Talent life, and the challenges persisted, even as she navigated fame that would overwhelm anyone. One of her more unusual dating experiences happened in America. After meeting a doctor at a hotel spa, they went on a date that lasted just 45 minutes, ending in such an abrupt way that her team and family were genuinely worried, fearing something might have happened to her. The panic highlights how even seemingly small missteps can feel amplified when your life is constantly in the spotlight. And yet, despite moments like these, Susan has never stopped believing that love is possible, even if it sometimes feels as rare and unpredictable as winning the lottery. What's interesting is how this quieter, more introspective side of her life has run parallel to her professional resurgence. By 2025, she was hinting at projects that would blend her past experiences with fresh energy, suggesting that even after decades of highs and lows, she wasn't done evolving. She was moving from a place of waiting and reflection to one of deliberate action, carefully choosing the next chapters of her life and career. The love story here isn't just about romance. It's also about her relationship with herself, her confidence, and the way she navigates the world after years of public scrutiny. She's learning to take risks in a controlled way, testing the waters of both creativity and connection, and slowly building the life she wants on her own terms. And now, the woman who once hesitated at small hotel lobbies or struggled with early heartbreak is the same woman stepping onto red carpets with a quiet confidence, teasing new music, and hinting at an album. Echoes, expected in early 2026. It's a reminder that growth doesn't happen overnight, and that sometimes the personal victories, learning to trust, to take chances, to keep moving forward, are just as significant as the public ones. So while Susan Boyle's love life has had its awkward moments, missteps, and missed chances, it's also a story of persistence, hope, and the ongoing journey of building a life that feels authentic, full, and still very much her own. And as she moves into these next chapters, both in music and personal life, it makes you wonder, what other surprises might she have in store? The woman she is now. That Pride of Britain red carpet moment wasn't a random flash of glamour. It was years in the making. By 2025, Susan Boyle had been quietly building toward this phase of her career, dropping hints of new music that would eventually form her upcoming album, Echoes, slated for release in early 2026. The tracks are a mix of familiar favorites, reimagined alongside fresh material, created with longtime friends in the music scene, including collaborations with Ed Sheeran. And she describes the project as a kind of letter to her late mother, full of heartfelt ballads that tap into her own experiences and memories. Her live performances are being approached differently, too, with a focus on intimacy rather than stadium spectacle, starting with a low-key Scottish holiday tour designed to connect with audiences in smaller, personal venues rather than chasing massive arenas. Her voice, of course, has grown with her. Time hasn't dulled it. If anything, it has added layers of nuance and depth. Listeners notice subtleties in her phrasing, the slight inflections that speak of decades of life and experience behind each note. And the look she presents now is intentional rather than reactive. Her soft blonde hair, tailored outfits that are elegant but comfortable, and a presence that radiates confidence without forcing attention. Gone is the every woman label. Now she's simply Susan Boyle, carrying herself on her own terms. Offstage, life is steady and full in a quieter way. Her home in Lockwood has been adapted to support creativity and comfort, including a small home studio and even therapy dogs for company. She's deeply involved with family, keeping close bonds with nieces and nephews through calls and visits, while also dedicating time to advocacy work, particularly with Scottish autism organizations and local youth choirs, reflecting her ongoing desire to help others find their voice. Romance isn't a priority. She remains single, enjoying occasional private dates, but she approaches relationships with patience, humor, and a sense of balance, often noting that love for her is often expressed most fully through music. Social media has become a window into this chapter of her life, from garden snapshots to rehearsal clips, allowing fans to feel connected without intruding. Posts celebrating her return to music rack up hundreds of thousands of likes, and the comments reflect admiration for not just her talent, but the calm, grounded presence she has cultivated over the years. It's a version of Susan Boyle that feels comfortable in her own skin, confident in her artistry, and quietly thriving both on stage and off, reminding everyone that evolution can be graceful, deliberate, and deeply satisfying. If Susan's journey inspired you, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more stories of remarkable lives, and ring the bell so you won't miss our next deep dive. And tell us in the comments, what's your favorite Susan moment that left you speechless?